All right, let's be real. Are you tired of your web scrapers breaking every single time a developer sneezes? Well, today, we're going to unlock the secret to building absolutely rock-solid locators using something called XPath Axes. You've totally been there, right? Just staring at the DOM, maybe a cold sweat on your brow, trying every CSS selector and XPath you can possibly think of. But that one stubborn element, it just refuses to cooperate. It is, no joke, the bane of every automation engineer's existence. And look, it's not you, it's the code, I promise. Modern web apps are meant to be dynamic. And that's great for users, but for us, it's a complete nightmare for automation. Those constantly shifting IDs and classes, they can make your locators as fragile as a house of cards in a hurricane. So this is what I like to call the elusive element problem. And it's exactly why just relying on basic IDs and classes is, well, it's a recipe for disaster in the long run. We need something way more robust. So what are the usual suspects here? You know the drill. We've got those dynamic attributes that seem to change with every single page load. We've got elements that have 0 unique identifiers. And, oh yeah, those super deep, complex, nested page structures that are just a total pain to navigate. And of course, the classic, trying to find an element based on what's sitting right next to it.
Okay, so how do we outsmart these tricky elements? Well, we've got to shift our focus. Instead of trying to find the element directly, we start thinking about its relationships. And that, my friends, is where the real power of XPath comes into play, specifically with something called XPath Axes.
So what are XPath Axes? Basically, they're a method for navigating the DOM based on the relationships between elements, not just their individual attributes. The best way to think about it? It's like a family tree. You can find absolutely anyone as long as you know how they're related to someone else. Think about it like this. You might not know the exact address of John Doe's younger brother, right? But if you can find John Doe, well, finding his brother is suddenly a piece of cake. XPath Axes work in the exact same way. They let you pinpoint an element just by knowing its relationship to another, much easier to find element. Okay, now that we've got this family tree idea in our heads, let's actually meet some of the most important relatives. These are going to be your core directional tools, the ones that will let you navigate the DOM with some real precision and confidence. We're going to focus on these 6 key axes, and with these, you can move in pretty much every direction imaginable, up to a parent, down to a child, sideways to a sibling. You can even go all the way up to an ancestor or all the way down to a descendant. So let's start our journey by looking up. All right, first up, we have the parent axis. This one's pretty straightforward. It's your most direct upward connection in the whole DOM tree. It lets you move from a child element straight up to its immediate parent. It's super simple, but trust me, it's incredibly powerful. It just takes you exactly one single step up the DOM tree, right to the element that directly contains whatever you started with. Here's a perfect real-world example. Let's say you can easily find the text login inside a span tag, right? That's easy. But what you really need to do is click the button that contains that text. So what do? With the parent access, you just find the span and then say, hey, give me your parent button. Boom, problem solved. Okay, now let's talk about moving sideways. And honestly, this is where XPath Axes really start to shine, especially when you're dealing with things like forms and tables. The following-sibling access is going to be your absolute go-to for finding elements that show up after your starting point, but on the same level of the DOM. So, back to our family tree analogy, following-sibling basically finds all the younger brothers and sisters of your current element. The key thing here is they all share the same parent, and they're all on the exact same level of the tree. Oh man, this is the classic use case. You'll see this everywhere. You find the label username, which is usually static and super easy to locate, and then you just ask for the input field that's its following sibling. That's it. This is an incredibly stable and reliable way to grab form fields, even if their IDs and classes are changing all over the place.
All right, so we've covered the basics of moving up and moving sideways. Now, let's get a little more advanced and see how we can chain these axes together to solve a much more complex, real-world problem.
So here's the challenge. Imagine you have a totally stable locator for a phone number input field. Great. But what you need to do is extract the main heading of the entire form that it belongs to. The catch? The heading has no unique ID, so you can't just target it directly. How in the world do you get there? The solution? We chain the axes together. It's literally like giving someone directions. First, we start at our known element, the phone input. Got it? Second, we travel up the family tree to find an ancestor that is a form tag. Now, an ancestor is a parent or a grandparent, any element that contains our starting point, no matter how far up it is. Okay, so now we're at the form. Finally, from that form, we travel all the way down to find a descendant that is an H2 heading. And a descendant is the opposite, any child, grandchild, any element contained within our form, no matter how deep it's nested. See how that works? It's an incredibly powerful technique for navigating those really complex DOM structures.
Okay, as you start using XPath Axes, you're probably going to run into a few common points of confusion. It happens to everyone, so let's clear up the two biggest ones right now. That way you can avoid these common pitfalls and really start using these tools with a ton of confidence.
First up, the difference between following and following-sibling. And believe me, this distinction is absolutely crucial. Following-sibling is super specific. It's only looking for your brothers and sisters, the elements on the exact same level. Following, on the other hand, is like casting a giant net. It finds every single element that appears after your node in the entire document. Cousins, nephews, everyone, regardless of their relationship. So yeah, if you need the next input field in a form, you want following-sibling. But if you need, say, any link that appears after a certain paragraph, then following is your tool. And you'll find the exact same kind of distinction between child and descendant. Child is very, very precise. It only finds your direct children, just one level down, that's it. Descendant is way broader. It finds your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Basically, it finds your entire lineage. Every single element contained within your starting point, no matter how deep it is.
So let's wrap this up. What are the key things to remember? First, get comfortable navigating the DOM by relationship, not just by attributes. Second, start thinking of XPath Axes as your secret weapon against those pesky dynamic elements. Third, always, always keep that family tree analogy in your head. It's going to be your best guide. And finally, don't be afraid to chain these axes together. That's how you create truly powerful and resilient locators. Okay. You now have the tools, you have the knowledge, you can go out and navigate even the most ridiculously complex web pages with total confidence. So I really only have one question left for you. What elusive element are you going to find first?